Thanks for joining. We've got a packed house today, which is really exciting for me. Apologize for the echo. You know that day when the 3-year-old class floods and you have to adjust really quickly? Well, there is a very noisy construction project going on right outside my office. So I am hidden away in the back office where it's the most quiet. Well, actually, I'm in the closet, okay? But we just keep moving, right? And we do what we need to do and we go on. So I'm right there with you guys today. Thank you for joining. We're excited about this year's series on succession planning. This is our third. We had a state of the industry to kick the year off, and then we got started with our succession planning content. This is the third masterclass in the series. On the first one, we talked about what are your options for your business succession. One day you're going to leave the business. You're either going to be prepared for it and plan for it, or it's going to find you. So we would like for you to plan for it. Last month, we did options for your real estate. We had Greg Seibert from Essential Properties join as an industry expert on what the options are for working with outside investors on your real estate. And that we love that. You guys can pick up the former classes along with previous years from our website, so please use those liberally. We do this masterclass series as a service to the community and to our clients. It is our mission to support you in the business and financial needs of your company because you are doing very important work. And it's really difficult to have places to go in our educational community to learn and know and figure out and diagnose. So that is our mission. That's what we love to do, and consider us a resource as you work your way through your company. Before we get going on the content, a couple of announcements. We have been very busy this spring. We just ended our spring series of partner speaking engagements. Mike Pepper from our team was at AELL along with Kathy Petchel. Kathy and Henry were at PACE in California. Kathy and Molly were at Sequel. I was at the Georgia Childcare Association. Kathy Petchel and I came back last week from Leadership Connections in Chicago, our first trip there, and it was fantastic. And then Kathy, Molly, and I all spoke at the World Forum on Early Education in China last month. It was fantastic. It was our first trip there. You guys budget and plan for that organization. They are in Vancouver in 2021. It's every other year. And it was a phenomenal experience. There were people from 71 countries, and the speakers were just amazing. It was just a really life-changing experience. So certainly recommend that to you guys as you're growing yourself and your team. There are very important concepts in culture education and language and teachers from other countries, and it's one of the things I think still gives you sizzle in the industry. If you're with me a lot, I've been talking a lot recently about sizzle inflation. I think that you have to be basically very good at your education, but also you need a little market differentiator. And the things that used to be sizzle even 2 or 3 years ago are now just expected. So culture, language, learning about other countries, and connecting your company with other countries. There's some cool initiatives in the world. If that's of interest to you, let me know. But again, one of the things I think still gives you sizzle. So I'd stay connected to the international community. We're starting to see more and more international companies providing early education in the U.S. And a lot of our U.S.-based early education companies are now in other countries. We visited several in China, they're in London, they're in the Emirates, they're all over the world. So that will continue. So really exciting progress there. we have, if you guys are not with us, typically we do 2 internal events annually. We do a 1-day deep dive into everything business and financial. It's called Thrive. Our next Thrive workshop is on the meat of the workshop's on the 13th in Denver. We're adding a new feature this year. We are inviting our guests. We limit this to 100. We always max out. This is our 3rd or 4th year. We're in early bird registration, but we are adding in a feature this year because what I've started to notice is that we talk about financial metrics and accounts receivable and financial statement presentation and everything financial, cost control and tuition rates and discounting. But what I'm finding a lot is that a lot of our clients are running really hard toward one area that they think is their greatest area of opportunity, and they're often missing something that may seem minor but would make a huge financial impact. So what we're adding this year is a feature where we work with you one-on-one in advance to identify the areas that you should focus on here and in other places. So we are booking one-on-one appointments the day before in Denver. There's information we would like for you to send in advance so we can diagnose it for you and then sit down with you and say A, B, and C are the things you really need to focus on. And this is the difference it would make in your company. So we're really excited about that. We have tried to figure out a way to give more individualized attention during that event. And so we're giving this a shot. So we'd love for you to join. We'd love to get your feedback and see what you think about that. Also, our 3-day conference shift will be in Miami in February. We have not launched that event yet. I think registration for that will start right after this Thrive event. We limit that event to 300. We're at the Eden Rock Hotel, and we're really excited about that. It'll be a great venue. And February in Miami, plan to end the day at noon on Friday and stay for the weekend. It should be great. So let's talk about how to prepare for your future. This is so important to me. I take this very personally because I don't want you to be the next phone call I get when something has happened and you have to make an emergency decision. An emergency decision is I'm sick and my team is not prepared yet to take over and I don't know what to do with this business and I'm shutting the doors. Or there's been a devastating event and I'm trying to figure out how to recover from that. Or someone has called me and said they would pay me this amount of money for my business. I'm not ready. My team's not ready. I don't have the information. I don't want to miss this opportunity, but I'm just not prepared. We want you guys to be prepared for an option strategy always. That way you can make a decision or not. You can plan for it or not. As an accountant, we love forecasts and budgets and plans, and I always chuckle a bit. You need a plan. I want you to make a plan. We make a plan in Hinge. You always need to have a plan. But the real truth is you have to be prepared to be opportunistic. So the plan may materialize exactly like you expected. I'm going to sell in 3 years, but then the market crashes. Or I'm going to grow, I'm going to acquire another school, but then the opportunities aren't good. And maybe if you're too focused on it, you make a bad decision. Or I'm going to build and the interest rates go sky high and construction costs go up. So I want you to be prepared for many different strategies, and then when the opportunity comes up, you're ready and you can act on that strategy. So an options-based strategy. I like to throw this in here. We had a great 3-day event this last year at Shift in Austin. Our keynote speaker was my buddy John Warlow, who wrote the book Built to Sell. And John makes a strong point that you always run a company as if you're going to run it forever. This is a common mistake people make as they're thinking about selling, or they just get tired, or they're ready to retire and the team's not ready to step up and they lose momentum. So whatever has to happen for your company to continue to run like it's running forever, continually build the value, build qualities into your company, which we're going to talk about, that allow it to be sold in a moment. Maybe you weren't thinking about this at all, but the opportunity knocks on your door, and maybe you still say no, but maybe it's just too good an opportunity to pass up. So run your company as if you will always run it. Be ready for multiple opportunities, and then you're prepared when things happen. So we want to talk about this in 3 parts. The first thing we want you to do is be as financially healthy as possible. I'm going to talk about what that means in context of an exit. This is part of our Thrive event. We want you to know what it will take for you to be as financially healthy as possible. We don't want the person that comes in after you to get the gain in business value. We want you to create it, and then you get rewarded. I have a regular conversation with sellers when they say, well, but the new person could come in and they could do this and this and this. Sure. And I'm sure they will, and they will be rewarded for that, but they're not going to pay you for what you haven't done yet. So you need to do it, prove it, keep it as financially healthy as possible, and keep that cash flow strong, because that's the basis of your business value. We said already to develop an option strategy. I'll give you a little more information there. And then it's a real growth market right now. We're at an all-time high. Your school should be very full of children, and your biggest problem should be, where do I find the team to work with all of these children? That should be your biggest problem. If you're not pretty full, let's talk, because that might be a different issue, but you should be pretty full and considering growth. I believe that's the way you keep strong team members engaged. And the larger you are, the more profitable you are, the more your business is worth, and your real estate's worth. Your real estate's worth what the business in it can generate. We're going to have a complete session on that later in the year. As a matter of fact, there's one from a few years ago, if that's of interest to you. But we want you to grow until you're ready to exit. So first of all, let's talk about your company's financial health. Like I said in Thrive, what can you do, first of all? So it takes knowing how you compare to the average financially healthy company in this industry. And then you're going to be a little different. No company is exactly the same, but we've built a model that we use, and we'll give it away freely. I built it 25 years ago. I've been making changes as the market changes. Good news is it does not drastically change. I've tweaked 2 things over the last 25 years. I'm monitoring 2 more. And this comes from seeing and having access to financial statements from companies all over the world, actually now, small companies, the national groups, the religious-based, and public school after school. So we're constantly monitoring this, but put yourself out there, learn, know where your opportunities are, and then implement changes. I'll give you 2 real quickies that I'm talking to a lot of people about right now. This is the time to be very aggressive with your tuition rates. It's also the time to look very closely at what you're discounting. Discounts can be a hidden factor in financial health when you're counting the heads and you think you're full or you're near full, and a bigger factor is how many of those people are actually paying you full rate. Big factor, but there's some market changes there that you can take advantage of. Also, we've got some great strategies for increasing tuition rates. Beyond just, hey, I'm going up $10 a week. You know, there are other things you can do with incoming families and with other charges and things like that. Completely different. But learn, know, stay ahead. I've never seen a faster market change than we're in right now. just when, so, you know, if I look at my own company, we make a plan, but today and for the last 3 years, I have been constantly surprised by the strength of the market and what's going on. So you make a plan. I've successfully predicted 0 of this. So, you know, didn't predict the last market downturn, did not predict where we are today, and we're constantly saying we've got to be at a height right now, and then we go higher. It's definitely a seller's market. There's a lot of competition for quality assets, both business and real estate, which makes it difficult to grow, but very strong value. So so first objective, as you think of an option strategy, is to be as financially healthy as possible, be good stewards of parents' money, and use that money to fuel your company. Step 1. The second thing we want you to do, and we talk about this also in Thrive, is keep information relevant and timely. We want you to keep key metric information very fast. It does, if it's 3 months before you get the information, honestly, it's irrelevant. The world's moved on, and you know, nobody knows what your company actually looks like now, 3 months later. But you need to keep basic financial data that comes from your parent payment record keeping system, like FTEs and accounts receivable, and which age groups are more enrolled, and where's your revenue coming from, what are your discounts, where are your registration fees, and where are all your family data. The second thing is that you need to get fully prepared financial statements every month minimum. And we know a lot of people that run their companies very well by getting a tax return each year, and they're very intuitive about it. And I say this with the utmost respect. They really just have a gut about how their company's doing. We were at a conference last week, and we met with a mother and son, and the son is starting to be more instrumental in the company. And the problem with it, the mother's a master. I could see it. She knows her company. She watches the bank account. She just has a gut about how it's doing. But her son doesn't know when he's struggling. He needs data. He needs to understand and see it on paper. Same thing with the bank. If you want to go get a loan to grow, maybe you need a new vehicle. Maybe you have the opportunity knocks and a competitor in your city calls and says, do you want to take over my school? Well, I've got a big problem. You can practically have it. These are commonplace opportunities that you won't be ready for without information that's timely and accurate. We have a format we like. I would consider outsourcing it. Why should you try to be an accountant? I'm not trying to be your teacher. But outsource it and get someone to produce information for you that you can make very important decisions around. We can help with format and give you more data there if that's of interest, but be sure your information is timely, accurate. We want your other systems and processes to be best practice. You heard me say earlier that things that used to be special are now commonplace. Things like front door security, cameras. I like cameras for internal purposes. I'm not a big fan of parent access to cameras, and I think the industry's going in that direction. But I think that cameras can help you a lot in training and in monitoring and in event management if there's an event. But that's just one of many, many. Keep yourself current and relevant with systems and processes that are at the top of the market. You don't want someone to look at your company and say, cool, you know, they're making a good cash flow, but I'm going to spend $10,000 on a camera system, so that just knocked your price way down. So you want to be sure that you are implementing and staying current. It will gain you more in the end than it will cost you now, 5 times more. So now is the time to continually keep up with what's going on in the market there. Saying the same thing here, really keep up to date with industry shifts and trends. I mentioned culture education. There's also a big push for STEM. I know you guys have been saying to me, we've been doing STEM forever. Well, tell somebody. you know, because there are new brands coming out in the world that promote themselves as STEM schools. And parents in those markets wonder what this new exciting thing is. Let your parents know what you're doing and what makes you special, but stay current on what those things are and what today's parent group is looking for. One of those that I love to mention is to keep your facility constantly updated. And when I say rebrand, there are some national groups that rebrand, and that doesn't mean they change their logo or their colors but they completely revamp their facility every 10 to 15 years. It's expensive. It's really expensive, but we've sold some of those and they have more than made their money. They look brand new when they're 40 years old. The danger in not doing this is that there is so much new construction from groups who are building in markets across the country and in markets that they historically didn't go to. And your risk is that bright and shiny comes right down the street and parents gravitate toward that. So keep your facility in top form. It will pay for itself in the long run. If you lease your facility, consider asking your landlord for the money to do it. Your landlord, I'm a landlord, so I'm going to speak from that respect. I want my tenant to do well. I want my building to stay on top. I don't want the risk that they will vacate, and I don't want an empty building. So if I get a phone call that says, will you invest a little money in your building and we'll pay you more rent for that investment, I'm more than happy to do that. So if you lease, consider asking your landlord to help you. If you own your building, maybe go back to the bank. You know, you've got a mortgage. Maybe you don't, good for you if you don't, but maybe borrow the money from the bank. And I think you'll see the return on that investment more than pay for what you put into it. I have to give a shout out here always to my friends at Better Beans Branding in Atlanta. Thad Joyner is a dear friend. We sold his company about, probably longer than I think, 6 or 7 years ago. And Thad started Better Beans, and what he's doing is helping early education companies rebrand. But that's more than just what does your building look like. It's who are you at the core. What do you believe in? What makes you different? How do you communicate that to people when they call? How do you conduct a tour? Where are your tour stops that force you to stop and talk about those key elements of your company? How do your people look? How do they present themselves? Do they reflect what you believe in? And so on and so on. But it's incredibly important in this progressive market to stay on top of branding and who you are and promote that well. Let's talk a little bit about how to have an option strategy. The first thing that I want people to do is grow their team. Now, I have to say that this is hard for a lot of business owners. It's a little bit hard for me. I'm getting better at it. So I can relate to you guys if this is something that you struggle a bit with. We worked hard to build a company, and we did that by very closely managing and monitoring what goes on in that company. So letting go is tough. But I don't know if you're like me, but I'm getting a little tired. So that makes it a lot easier. But your company is stronger for a lot of reasons when you begin to grow your team and give them more and more responsibility. Don't just hand over the keys and walk out the door. This takes time. It takes energy. Our entire masterclass next month is on specifically how to grow your team, how to grow your manager, in what key ways, where are the benchmarks and the boundaries for him or her to operate in before they come back to you. You need this team in place before you can consider an exit. It's one of the key elements that successors will look for. They want to believe that your walking out the door does not sacrifice the business. If you are the person that has every relationship that parents look to, that you hire every teacher, you manage everything that goes on in the building, then they're entering with great risk if you are not there. You almost want to build yourself to a strategy where you check in. Obviously, we own a business. We're never not going to check in, right? But the key people in the building won't be sacrificed if you are not there. The second part of this, if you're going to have really great team members, they will almost demand that you allow them to grow and that you continue to give them growth opportunities. This is why adding a new program, expanding your building, moving to a second site, starting a public school, going into the public school and doing their after school program. There are a lot of ways to grow, but in order to keep those really strong people engaged, you need to create growth opportunities constantly. So lots of reasons to do this, but work on yourself a little bit if you need to. Start to bring those people up. Kathy Petchel on our team has done some beautiful work in giving you ideas about how to bring up people who think they're ready to be managers and you're not so sure, by giving them little snippets of responsibility. So consider that, again, use this as a resource if you need some specific ideas, but grow your team, have them ready. It's like being a parent. I've always said our only job as a parent is to teach our children to live without us. That's it. Everything else will figure itself out. Same thing here. You're not going to be there forever. Newsflash. Allow these people to grow and thrive when you're no longer there. I'd like for you to groom potential internal buyers. Maybe it's your director. Maybe it's a teacher. This is a tough strategy, and I adore it when it happens, because typically that person helped you get where you are, but also typically resources are an issue. So it's something to think about, but as you grow those people, maybe you even take the next step and you teach them more about the business operation. Most people will put a boundary around their directors knowing everything about the business and the way it runs, but they'll allow them to know the financial piece about parents and what they pay and the collections and expense control. They might not know what you pay yourself or what you pay yourself in rent and things like that. But maybe go to that step. If you've got a really, really strong person, be prepared that if you go that route, you may end up financing for that person. So you want to be really careful with that risk. But great strategy when it works out. But consider moving to the next step and grooming those people in your company. This is my team, but just because they're cute. But we want you to develop relationships. I think I've got a better slide coming up next. Okay. We want you to begin to develop relationships that put yourself out there and get you ready when you need to be ready. So here are the 3 key teams that we believe you need, and I believe you need to start building these relationships now. The first one is get to know brokers, and not just us. There's some other great brokers in the industry that also work in early education. There are also some generic brokers, more often than not, in your community or in your state that you could let know that you're interested in growth. So the couple of reasons to do this is, first of all, let them know what your interests are. We don't go blabbing this around. I know it's, you don't want to say to me, I'm going to sell my company next year and take the risk that I'm passing this along to anyone else, because we are fanatical about confidentiality in a transaction. So we would never set ourselves up for failure initially, but let brokers know that you're interested in growth. What type of growth? Do you want to own your own real estate, or would you prefer to lease it? Do you want to know about opportunities with Head Start or the public school? Do you want to know if there's another school in your market for sale? Do you want to expand your building and you need a resource for financing? What do you want to do? Let as many brokers know as possible. At the very least, introduce yourself. Just say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I have a large school in this city. And I don't know what I want to do yet, but keep me posted if anything comes up there. Because we don't publicly market anything. We only internally market because, again, confidentiality risk. But if we know what your interests are, where you are, and sometimes we don't even know you exist. So we need to know you exist. We need to know about your company, what things you're thinking about, because then when we see those opportunities, we're picking up the phone and calling you and saying, hey, maybe this isn't exactly what you were thinking, but it's an opportunity in your market. Do you want to consider it? So get to know brokers. The second thing is you need a strong attorney. We love it when you have an attorney who has done transactions. There are a lot of different types of attorneys. You get litigation attorneys and real estate attorneys, which aren't bad either, as a second choice. But be sure that you choose an attorney that, first of all, has had some experience in transactions from a business or real estate standpoint, but also pay special attention to the culture of that attorney. Maybe ask them, tell me about a transaction when things didn't go so well. How did you handle that in the negotiation? You disagreed with the other side's attorney, and how did that go? Because we've had clients with fabulous attorneys who have been, they're there to protect you, but also they need to understand that you actually want to get this done. So, squabbling over a period or a comma in the legal agreement is not going to serve you well. So interview and get to know transaction attorneys. The last one, which is probably the hardest one, have people talk to me about this all the time, and I'm feeling your pain. You need an accountant. I would love it if it's the same person that produces your financial statements, because they know your company really well. But I want this accountant to be creative. So there's the bad part. And I can talk about us because I'm an accountant. But you want that person to think creatively. You want them to keep you relevant on tax situations, and when timing is good for a sale or maybe not so good, or you should think about this as you prepare to sell or exit. We also want that person and the attorney involved very early in getting offers to discuss the ramifications legally or financially from a tax standpoint of what you're about to enter. It's a complicated world. And I did taxes until 33 years ago, but I would never consider either advising or doing my own taxes today. It's just it changes constantly. So align yourself with an accountant, a transaction attorney, and as many brokers as possible. I don't mind telling you who they are either, because mainly we want you to be successful in what you do. So there's one strong way to prepare. We mentioned to keep an eye on tax strategies, and that's where this tax accountant can really come in handy. Tax ramifications of a business or real estate sale can make a dramatic difference in how you end up. It's not just give a check and put that money in the bank. You are going to obviously pay taxes, but there can be some excellent ways to minimize or put off taxes. You're never going to not pay them, but you can defer them with some strategies. But also you want to keep up with what's going on with businesses and recapture rules and all kind of fancy terms like that accountants make up to make them sound smarter. But keep your eye on those. Have somebody do that with you. Now I want to talk a little bit about growth. I mentioned growth. I mentioned that it is a difficult time to grow. It really is. There's a lot of competition. Most of the world is doing really, really well financially, and they want to grow with that. I used to work with somebody that's so annoying when he said this to me in the past, and now I repeat it constantly. You're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotten. I believe you can never stop growing in some way. If that's only adding a new program or expanding next door, whatever. But consider these things. The advantages of growth are your company's more valuable the bigger it is. It's just the truth of the world. So as we sell businesses, business value is based on a multiple of cash flow. And all that means is we calculate what the cash flow is going to be for the new owner. So that's complicated, but starting with yours and adjusting for what it will be for the new owner based on what will change. And then we apply a multiple. The multiples increase drastically the bigger your company. And the biggest increase is from 1 to 2 schools. So I love it when I had someone in a workshop about 15 years ago. And then about 8 years ago, they called and said, we saw you 15 years ago, and you said going from 1 to 2 schools was the biggest jump. So we built a second school, and now we're ready to sell, and we're doing really well. But I had a little panic moment and said, gosh, I'm glad I didn't know you were doing that. Even though I said it, I feel personally responsible. But it worked out really well. And then when you get up to 3 to 5 schools, there's another break. So big difference. And once you get up to multiple schools, and we say this to our clients a lot, then you can purchase or build a single school at a lower multiple, then it's immediately worth more to you. For instance, if your company is in the size range where you could get a 5 multiple on your cash flow, 5 times your annual cash flow, and you have the ability to buy a single school at a 3 multiple, it's immediately in your portfolio worth a 5. You just gained almost twice the value of what you bought because it's in your portfolio. So this is what the national and large regional guys are doing. You guys are aware, I know, if you listen to us, that they're growing really quickly. They're acquiring, they're paying big dollars for things. There's a lot of competition for it. But the game is what I just said. They're way up here as a national group. They can buy a small group or a single or 2, and here it's immediately in their portfolio where it's sometimes 2 or 3 times what they paid for it. So that's why there's so much competition for growth right now. We mentioned another advantage that was retaining and attracting great team members. I'm strong on that. I love it because it helps level out fluctuations in performance of individual schools. Maybe your director left. It's always the thing, right? So goes the director, so goes the school. I had this 3-month thing that I've been watching for my 33 years. Change that one person, and in 3 months, you will either tank or you will be full. It's that fast. And it's all about it. I have people call me a lot and say, we don't have that much competition. We're really struggling though. We can't get enrollment. Will you come and help us diagnose it? And my first comment is save your money. It's your leadership. And I know they don't want to believe me in that, but I've never seen a case that wasn't the truth. It might be a person you care about, and that's tough, and that's hard to hear, but in my experience, not being full in a market like today is typically leadership. So when that happens and you have an issue at one school, if you have more than one school, you have the time to work on it, change the leadership, get it back up, but it's not, your whole company didn't bottom out. It was leveled off with other schools. Your purchasing power is greater. Things get cheaper, so you have economies of scale. Now your food costs per item go down. Your insurance goes down. There are certain things that you can do now that cost you less money. The next one I really love is specialization of staff. So as you grow, you can now afford that in-house financial person. You can put a trainer on your team. You can add, so as I grew a company in my former life, the first thing I would think was, okay, we're short-handed now. What do I hate the most? Which is typically what you're not good at, right? Because we love what we're good at. Then you can add that resource to your team. So specialization of staff. And then it helps you afford employee benefits. This is a tough one, but it's really, really hard for a smaller company to afford the employee benefits that they need. The disadvantages, we mentioned them. A lot of people got into the business because what they adore is the daily interaction with staff and parents and children. And that's good, you know, but you aren't going to have that as you grow. And if you try to do that, you're going to cripple your company and cripple yourself. So having less control is often an issue for people, and it's tough, you know, but work on yourself. Like I said, let go. We have to let go of our babies, our children, and our businesses. At some point, it's going to happen in both respects. So we have to change and work on ourselves, but continue to grow. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to ask questions. I wanted to leave enough time for that. You will see a question and answer bar at the top. Type those in there. I've got a few in there already, so I'll take some of those. We do have our next masterclass date in June. It will be on the 20th. It's at 1 o'clock always. You guys have seen how OCD I am. We start at 1 o'clock and we finish at 2 o'clock. I want to be very respectful of your time. And we're going to be talking next time about how to grow your team specifically. Like I said, you know, not just to say, okay, grow your team, let them take over. How do you start? What do you consider giving them first? Where do you eventually draw the lines? How do you pull back when you need to? Do you give it to more than one person or just one person? So we'll talk about all that next time. So if you have a question, we have about 20 minutes. Certainly type it in. How do we find a broker that knows about preschools and their unique requirements? Great question. Thank you. Well, first of all, you know us. That's all we do. So there you go. Google, sell a preschool, sell a childcare center. There's one other national group other than HINGE that works nationwide. And then there are a couple of people who work either in a particular state or in a region of the country, and they have a strong base in early education. And I'm glad you asked that question because we believe that that's a necessity. We often get a call from another broker or somebody that's working with another broker and they didn't know who to go to. So first of all, we have almost 400 companies in our buyer database. So as we list companies, we aren't putting you out on the web saying, come buy this childcare center. We're calling the people that we know are interested in a company just like yours. We drop people off if we don't like the way they transition people, if we don't like the culture they create, or we don't feel like they pay what the market's demanding. We're pretty picky, and that's what you want. You want a person that has relationships, understands the nuances of the industry. They need to understand how licensing transitions work. They need to understand how people transitions best work. And I believe that someone who only does that or has a strong history in it is critical. But start there. If you don't find what you need, and I think you will, I think Google's a great place to go. Reach out, shoot me an email. I'll give you a couple of names. What do we need to have our financial statements audited? Oh, good one. I get this question a lot. In a transition, like I said, it's very important to keep your information accurate, relevant, and timely. You do not need to have an audit unless someone in your current world requires it. And that would typically only be a lender. Most people, even at pretty big, we have companies under contract that are 20, 30, 40 sites, and they are not required to be audited, so they don't go to that expense. And it's not an issue because in today's world, our buyers will practically, that diligence is getting tough. Let me just say, so the process you go through when you get your company under contract until you sell it, and this will be a complete masterclass this year, is getting more challenging. It's like going to the bank and asking for a loan is a lot more work than it used to be. Same thing here, they're asking for a lot of information. So by the end of it, they've practically audited your books. There are 3 levels of what you can do when you put your financial statements together. The first one, and what most people do, is called a compilation. All that means is they compile the data into a financial statement and give it to you. The second one's called a review, and that is the second level. They will look closely at your revenue and key expenses. So for us, they're salaries and rent, right? So they'll look at those and confirm those, but nothing else. And then in an audit, they will confirm a sample of expenses across your company. But no is the answer. We don't find it necessary in transitions to do that. I've got a question that came in over here. What's the typical industry multiple to value your business off of? Love it, like the way you're thinking. Okay, you're gonna hate this answer, but it's so the truth. It depends on several things. But the more important question is, what is the cash flow number that you're using to apply the multiple? And let me explain that. And this goes back to the question I just took on a broker that knows the industry. So we know how to scrub your numbers and make that cash flow presentation as strong as possible. And here's what I mean. Excuse me. Valuations start with your most recent financial statements. We make adjustments for anything that we can logically argue will change when you are not there. That removes anything related to you, your salary, your car, your insurance, your whatever, lawn care, whatever it is you're doing that's related to you personally, as long as you're not the director. If you're the director, we have to add back in a salary for that. But like I said, I don't want you in that situation. I want your management team ready to go. We might have to adjust the rent, or we might have to insert rent if you are selling your business but not your real estate. We know there are a couple of corporate expenses we can get away with removing because we know our buyers that well, but that's where experience takes over. So step one is strengthening the cash flow number, also called EBITDA. You will hear that, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. All it means is cash flow. And if you think about this logically, a buyer wants to know how much money they're going to make. What's the return on their investment? And that comes in the form of future cash flow. So they're going to figure out how much money they're going to make in a year and then apply the multiple. So now to your question, we're in a market where I'm going to give you some generalizations, but let me tell you everything that affects the multiple. How many schools you have, your level of subsidy, the age of your building, what market you're in, how the quality of your programming, the quality of your sizzle factor, your systems and processes and information. So I'm going to give you some baselines, but there are a lot of factors that move that up or back. Again, making it important to know the industry. It's been quite a bit since we sold a single school for less than a 3.5 to 4 multiple. That's moved up quite drastically from what used to be a 2 to 3 multiple. So single schools, 4-ish range. Once you get up to 3 schools, you're getting up in the 5 range. In order to get 6 to 7, you're probably going to be 7 to 15 schools. And 20 to 30 schools are going to be in the 9 range. The national guys, 2 transactions moved last year at 14 multiples. And so that's the game I mentioned to you earlier. Maybe they buy you at a 5. Now in their portfolio, you're worth a 14 to them. So that's how that works. I made that very simplistic because it's quite complicated and every company is different. And we're happy. We perform valuations for people without charge. So there are a couple of things. I'm going to go back to the broker question real quickly. Look out for a couple of things. We perform valuations without charge and then keep those updated for you because we want to know and keep you opportunistic. We want to know when there's an opportunity that would be good for you. Also look for the length of the listing agreement. We believe that in 6 months, and sometimes we do a year, if we haven't brought you an opportunity You should be free to go somewhere else. And we'll be the first ones to say to you. So look, avoid being tied up for a long period of time. And the last thing to look out for is the tail. There will be a certain amount of time that after the listing agreement expires, that you'll have to pay that broker anyway if you close. Be sure that it's limited to only the people they brought to you for consideration and for a short amount of time, not years, a short amount of time. Okay, how do you list your business for sale and keep it confidential from staff and competitors? Good question. Okay, here's how we do that. We almost never have a breach of confidentiality. And buyers understand that they are in as much risk as you are if people find out and the quality of the business drops and people are panicked and then what they just paid for isn't there anymore. So what we do is, number one, we develop with our sellers a list of targets. So first of all, you know who we're going to. It always shocks me when people have their company listed and they have no idea who their broker's talking to. You have the right to know and approve. We get that person to sign a confidentiality agreement, a legal agreement saying that they cannot disclose anything about this transaction, and you countersign it. So you are signing everyone that they are signing. So you're seeing who we're talking to. But again, we're not putting it out in the world. We're not putting it on Biz Buy Sell or web-based things. We're not. And you have the ability to say to us, no, I don't, they wouldn't be a good fit for me, or they're a local competitor and I don't want them to look. We have some listings right now where I believe that there's a local competitor that would be an awesome fit, but they don't choose to do it. And that's fine. They're in charge. I say to them, I think they would be confidential. I don't think you would have an issue. And I think they'd be an excellent buyer. And they say no, and we're good. We move on. So we are going directly to people. Then we don't go to licensing until we have all the diligence approved and waived and legal agreements in place. Then we go to licensing. We make a plan for announcing the teams. There's some variance on what I'm about to say, but most people will announce to staff and families 2 weeks before closing. That makes people nervous, but if they're good at acquiring, their number one job, I counsel buyers about this all the time, is to make the team feel good and special and change as little as possible. So they come in at the close of business day, they bring pizza, they answer questions, they tell them how special they are. They're so happy to be continuing this fine school. Here are some things we hope to do with you in the future, but no time soon. Whatever you did on Friday of close, do that again on Monday and keep going. Then parents will look at the staff and say, is this okay? And the staff will say, yeah, I think it's going to be fine. And the parents are fine. You don't have to sell yourself to parents. You have to sell yourself to teams, but they need to hear from you when it's the appropriate time. They don't need to hear, I've heard stories about things like licensing calling. I think we actually had this one time, but we passed it off as someone new. She was new. She was first week on the job. And she called the school and someone answered the phone and she said, I'm calling about the sale that you're doing to so-and-so. And they're like, what? So they brought it to their owner's attention and the owner just said, I called and checked on it. She's new. We hear those things all the time. But that is so rare when it's managed really, really carefully. And like I said, it's people's number one concern, and it's rarely an issue. So hopefully that got that one. Let's see what else we have in here. Okay, we have a question about the best way to grow. I think that depends. So to me, growth and the best way to grow depends on a couple of things. One thing is your people and what they're ready to grow into, resources, what resources do you have, and where are the best opportunities? So I would start small. I love, we are hearing so much in the community about early Head Start collaborations. So maybe something like that is what you start with. They are now bringing their classes into our client schools and paying our clients to provide the class. But the resources they have are tremendous. They're doing beautiful playgrounds, and they're equipping classrooms in a beautiful way, and it's a great situation with degree teachers and lower ratios. I know what you're thinking, and you're right, it causes a problem at times with other people in the building. But in my experience, it overall will pull up the quality of your building. But maybe you start with something like that. Maybe you go to the public school after school that is allowing the Parks and Rec or the YMCA to do their after school program, because if they're outsourcing it, you have the legal right to compete for that. If they're doing it themselves, then the sell is, hey, we think we can do a great academic program for you with all of these special things, STEM, language. There's some people doing language immersion, so the after school program's actually done in a second language. Schools love that, but maybe you expand that way. And if you're thinking this would cannibalize the after school program in my building, my experience was just the opposite, because the school is not open 365 days a year, or 355, how many every year open. They close in the summer, they close for holidays, and parents still need care. And we found that they would come to our nearby schools and also bring their siblings. So our after school programs and preschool programs actually got stronger. But maybe consider going in is, less capital needs. You need equipment and you need some marketing, but you don't have to have a building. There's some specific ways that we found to sell ourselves and compete with more recreational programs. We would give things to the school, like for every 25 students we enroll, we will scholarship one. You choose who that student is. Schools love this. They know the couple of children who couldn't afford it but would greatly benefit by an after-school program. Maybe you pay them a little bit of rent, so they're making a little bit of money. Base it on your enrollment or revenue. There's some very creative ways to do that. So maybe you start small. If resources aren't as big an issue, because lending is much more abundant than it was 10 years ago. SBA is your route to go when you're getting started. Maybe you borrow the money and build a new school. Maybe you borrow the money and you buy a new school. Maybe you approach your competitors. Maybe you don't wait for them to come to you and say that they'd like to sell. Maybe you call them up and say, hey, if you ever want to sell, I love your school. Let's talk. Just open the door. A week from now, when everything falls apart, they're going to remember and call you. So there's some great ways to grow that way. But to me, again, what are your people ready for? Groom them. Always be ready before you need to be ready. Groom your people. Watch for opportunities. Figure out where your resource boundaries are, and then put yourself out in the world for growth and let people know that you're interested in growing. We're at the end of our time. We've got a couple more questions, but we will not ignore your questions. We will always put those back out to you guys. I know that it's difficult at any time to take your lunch break and sit through a master class. We appreciate your time. We'd love to see you guys in Thrive in Denver next month on our next master class. If you have any questions, if we can be a resource, please reach out. You will get a short survey. Please take the time to answer that. We take it very seriously, your feedback. We'd like your suggestions on content, on format, what worked well, what didn't, how much you love my closet, where I am over here. So thank you again for being here. Take care and be well.